woman walked in at 10:02 on a Tuesday morning in October, and the first thing anyone noticed was her boots. Brown, worn, the kind of dust on them that does not come from a garden or a city sidewalk. It comes from work, real work, the kind that starts before the sun does and does not ask permission to continue after it sets. Her jacket was a Carhartt, canvas, faded at both elbows. Her jeans had the crease of a long truck ride. Her dark hair was in a braid that had come loose on the left side somewhere over. Nebraska at 30,000 feet, and she had not fixed it. She carried a single canvas tote, the kind sold at hardware stores for $4, and inside that tote was a MacBook Air, a Manila folder, and a cracked iPhone with a screen protector that had lifted at one corner. She looked to the 12 people in that lobby who glanced up from their phones, like a woman who had made a wrong turn. She had not made a wrong turn. She had made a very specific, very deliberate, very quiet right one. And by the end of that morning, every person in that building would understand the difference. The lobby of Meridian Realty Partners occupied the ground floor of a glass tower on 7th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan, all cold marble and recessed lighting, and the particular silence of spaces designed to communicate that the people who worked here were not to be interrupted with anything small. 2 curved reception desks faced the entrance. A wall of framed client photographs ran along the north side. Buildings, skylines, handshakes, the visual language of serious money. Behind the left desk sat Portia Dane. She was 29 years old, and she ran that reception desk with the absolute authority of someone who had decided, sometime in the previous 3 years, that controlling who entered a room was essentially the same thing as owning it. She was dressed precisely. She was groomed precisely. Her acrylic nails were a deep wine color, and she had a habit of tapping them once on the desk. When she had finished categorizing someone, a small private verdict delivered in sound. She heard the boots before she looked up. The sound they made on the marble was different from heels, different from loafers, different from the soft athletic shoes the delivery people wore. Heavier, purposeful. She looked up. Her eyes moved from the boots upward to the jacket to the braid, and in under 2 seconds, she had assigned a category. She had been doing this for 3 years. She was fast at it. She had never once considered that the speed itself was the problem. "Can I help you?" Portia said. The words were technically a question. The tone was not. "I have a 10 o'clock with Beckett Stroud," the woman said. "My name is Sable Quill." Portia looked at her screen. She typed. She scrolled. She typed again, with the slow deliberateness of someone performing effort rather than actually executing it. "I don't see that name in the system." The woman did not shift, did not adjust her bag, did not look around the lobby for help. She said, "It was confirmed 3 days ago. The referral came from Phineas Cord." The tapping stopped. 1 beat. Just 1. Then Portia said, "Phineas Cord. And what company did you say you were with?" "Quill Ridgeland and Cattle, Laramie County, Wyoming." Portia looked at her for 1 second longer than any professional exchange requires. Then she turned slightly in her chair, just enough to address the second receptionist beside her, in a voice calibrated to carry exactly as far as she intended, which was to every corner of that marble room. "Can you call upstairs? There's someone at the desk without a confirmed appointment." A pause that was not a pause, but a performance. "She can wait in the side chairs, not the client area." The side chairs were beside the service door. The client area had leather armchairs. Every person in that lobby heard the distinction. The investor in the navy suit heard it. The 2 junior agents finishing coffee heard it. The woman from accounting carrying a folder heard it. And Ob Birch, who had worked maintenance in that building for 11 years and had his own long, detailed memory of Portia Dane's reception desk, heard it and did not look up from the water dispenser he was refilling near the elevator bank. He heard it, and he reached into his front pocket, and he turned on the voice recorder on his phone. In the corner chair, almost hidden behind a structural column, a man with a press lanyard and a small digital recorder in his breast pocket also heard it. His name was Tatum Odell, and he wrote for the New York Post's business section. And he had come to the lobby that morning for a brief statement about a zoning appeal connected to a building on West 28th Street. He had arrived early. He had not planned to witness anything except a routine quote. But Tatum Odell had been a reporter for 14 years, and the skill that had lasted that long was not writing. It was recognizing a moment before other people decided what it was. He recognized this one. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply made sure his recorder was running and waited to see what happened next. Sable Quill looked at the side chairs. She looked back at Portia. She did not look angry. She did not look embarrassed. She looked for one brief moment, like a woman consulting an internal account, and finding that the number there was exactly what she had expected it to be. Then she walked to the client area. She sat in the leather chair. She set her canvas tote on the seat beside her. She reached inside it and removed the MacBook Air and opened it. Portia opened her mouth. Sable Quill turned the screen outward, not dramatically, not for the room, just enough. On the screen was a wire transfer confirmation from First Wyoming Private Bank to Meridian Realty Partners. The amount read $1,850,000. The date read 3 days prior. Sable Quill looked at Portia Dane and spoke in a voice that required no volume because the lobby had already gone completely silent. I am here to see Beckett Stroud. I have a 10 o'clock. My name is Sable Quill, and I believe I am in the process of buying the floor you are standing on. No one in that lobby moved. The investor in the Navy suit looked at the floor. The two junior agents looked at each other with the expression of people watching something they are going to remember for a long time. The woman from accounting pressed her folder flat against her chest and did not blink. Ob Birch kept his eyes on the water dispenser and kept the recorder running. And Tatum Odell, in the corner chair, took a slow breath and thought about headlines. Portia Dane said nothing. There was nothing useful to say. Upstairs on the 22nd floor, in an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Midtown skyline, a man named Beckett Stroud was already moving toward the elevator, and he had been moving toward it for 4 minutes, before his phone buzzed, before anyone called him, because he had seen something on the lobby's security feed on the monitor in the upper left corner of his office screen, and what he had seen was enough. This story does not begin in Manhattan. It begins in Laramie County, Wyoming, at 5:15 in the morning on a day in early October, where the only light is the single headlamp of a truck parked sideways in a field, and the only sound is cattle moving in the dark and the low creak of a wire fence being reset by a woman, crouching in the frozen grass with a tool in her hand and 11 items still on her list before sunrise. Her name is Sable Quill. She is 33 years old. She has been awake since 3:45 because one of the ranch hands flagged a pressure irregularity in the north water intake at 3:30, and by 3:45 Sable had already pulled on her Ariat boots and driven out to check it herself, because that is what she does, and that is who she is, and it has been who she is since she was 27 years old, and inherited a ranch in debt from a father who loved it but could not hold it. Howard Quill built Quill Ridge land and cattle from 400 acres and a handshake philosophy. Buy dirt, improve it, hold it, and never make the people who sell to you feel like they lost something they should have kept. He spent 40 years building the operation to 8,200 acres, 600 head of cattle, water rights on 3 streams, a hay operation that ran year-round. The people Howard bought parcels from over the decades came to his funeral. Every one of them. That is a specific kind of testimony that cannot be manufactured. Howard's son Dale inherited the ranch at 51. Dale was not a bad man. He was a complicated one, which is sometimes worse, because complicated men can explain themselves well enough that the damage they do takes years to fully understand. Dale had lived his entire life in the shadow of a father whose respect came the way weather comes, without being asked for and impossible to argue with. Dale drank, not every day, but enough. Enough that the decisions suffered. Enough that 3 key employees left in 12 months. Enough that the credit line at First Wyoming Bank moved from a precaution to a lifeline, to a liability that had to be serviced before anything else. When Dale died of a heart attack in the tack room at 6 on an April morning, Sable was 27 years old and working a separate operation in Goshen County, learning water management and grazing rotation. She had a degree from the University of Wyoming in agricultural business, $4,200 in her checking account, and student loans she was paying on an extended plan. She drove home that night. She sat at her grandfather's kitchen table with the bank statements that had been sitting in a kitchen drawer for 8 months, and she read them for 2 hours. And when she finished, she closed the folder and made a pot of coffee and started a list. The debt was $180,000. The operation was understaffed. The North Hay contract had lapsed. 3 of the 12 employees had not been paid in 6 weeks. She paid the employees first. She called the bank at 8 the next morning and introduced herself as the new operations manager. She renegotiated the terms of the credit line. She rebuilt the hay contract. She fixed the north fence herself on a Saturday with borrowed tools and her neighbor Carl's reluctant help, and a playlist that Carl complained about loudly the entire time, and she ignored cheerfully because the fence needed to be done, and the music was fine. She did not take a salary for the first 14 months. She drove a 2009 Toyota Tundra that burned oil in cold weather. She ate what the ranch produced. She paid off the debt in 4 years. When she was 31, her grandfather's attorney, a man named Ridley Theus, who had been Howard Quill's lawyer since 1979 and had the particular stillness of someone who has kept important secrets for a very long time, called her into his office in Cheyenne and placed a document on the table in front of her. A trust, established in 1998 by Howard Quill, for Sable specifically, not for Dale, not split between just Sable. Ridley explained that Howard had watched his son for a long time and had made his decision quietly, in the way he made all decisions that mattered, without announcement and without asking for anyone's approval. The trust would mature on Sable's 33rd birthday. At current valuation, $47.2 million. Sable sat in that chair for a long time and said nothing. Then she said, "What was he thinking when he set this up?" Ridley opened a desk drawer and removed a folded note written in Howard Quill's handwriting on a piece of lined paper from a yellow legal pad. He read it aloud. It said, "For Sable, who fixes things without being asked, who pays people what they are owed, who never makes anyone feel small for needing help. Buy something that pays for itself. Your grandfather loved you more than he knew how to say. I hope this says it." Sable Quill did not cry in Ridley Theus's office. She cried in her truck in the parking lot for approximately 6 minutes, parked under a cottonwood that had already gone gold for the season. Then she started the truck and drove home. She had cattle to feed. Over the next 2 years, she educated herself the way she educated herself about everything, which is to say methodically, without shortcuts, and without performing effort for anyone's benefit. Commercial real estate, capital allocation, cash flow analysis, net operating income, cap rates, lease structures, deferred maintenance as a negotiating variable. She read every relevant book available through the Cheyenne Library. She downloaded white papers at midnight on the Kindle she kept on her nightstand next to the lamp and her grandfather's watch. She drove to Denver once for a real estate investment seminar and sat in the back row and took 40 pages of notes and asked 3 questions that, the presenter later told a colleague, were the most technically precise questions he had fielded in 5 years of doing those events. She was not in a hurry. She had a ranch to run. But she was not wasting time either, because she had been taught by Howard Quill and by 4 years of debt repayment that time has a cost, and people who pretend otherwise eventually pay it at the worst possible moment. When the trust matured on her birthday in August, she called Phineas Cord. Phineas was 71 now, retired to a house in Scottsdale with a vegetable garden and a standing Thursday golf game. But his mind was as precise as it had ever been, and when Sable Quill called him, he picked up on the second ring. Phineas Cord had been the founding partner of Meridian Realty Partners for 27 years before he retired. He had sold Howard Quill his first commercial property in 1987, a small warehouse outside Denver that Howard held for 12 years and sold for 8 times what he paid. He had stayed in Howard's life afterward as an advisor, and eventually as something closer to a friend, the way certain professional relationships evolve when the people inside them are both honest enough to sustain more than the transaction. He still held 14% equity in Meridian Realty. He was not a passive figure. He was a phone call that mattered. Sable told him what she wanted. A commercial building in Manhattan, income producing, under $20 million, cash purchase, no financing contingency, clean, close. Phineas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know the building. I know the firm. I will make a call." He made the call on a Thursday afternoon. He did not call the general line. He called Aldous Fenn, the managing partner, directly on his personal cell. Aldous Fenn had spoken to Phineas Cord perhaps 6 times in his career, and had walked away from each conversation slightly changed by it. Phineas said, "A woman named Sable Quill is coming in on Tuesday. She is Howard Quill's granddaughter. Howard was my client for 30 years and one of the best men I ever did business with. She wants the West 28th Street property. She will pay cash. She does not need financing approval. She does not need committee sign-off. She needs competence, and she needs to be treated with respect. And the first of those is your firm's professional obligation, and the second should not need to be requested." Aldous Fenn thanked him, ended the call, and immediately forwarded the message to Beckett Stroud with one line. "She is yours. Do not miss this." The appointment was booked under the name Sable Quill. It was in the system. It had been in the system for 3 days. It never reached Portia's attention because Portia Dane had stopped typing and started deciding before she finished looking. Beckett Stroud was 43 years old and had been the senior managing partner at Meridian Realty Partners for 6 years. Before that, he had spent 9 years as a commercial real estate attorney, handling transactions in the $200 million range, and before that, He had been a young associate at a firm in Boston, trying to learn as fast as possible everything that law school had not taught him about how power actually moves through a room. He was not a warm man in the way that word is usually meant. He was precise. He was honest in a way that occasionally made clients uncomfortable because he would tell them the truth about a property, even when the truth was expensive. He had walked out of 2 deals in the past 3 years because the counterparties were being asked to sign documents that did not accurately represent what they were signing. He had a reputation in this industry that was worth considerably more than the commission on any single transaction, and he knew it, and he was not willing to trade it. He had a daughter named Prue. She was 9 years old and spent every other weekend with him in his apartment in the West Village, and she had a habit of leaving hair ties on every flat surface in the apartment, the kitchen counter, the bathroom shelf, the arm of the couch, the corner of the coffee table. Beckett had never moved a single one. He was not sure he could have explained exactly why, except that the apartment felt different when she had been there, and moving the hair ties felt like erasing a specific kind of evidence he was not ready to erase. He had been divorced for 3 years. His former wife, Caroline, had told him at the end that she felt like she was competing with a building every time she asked for his attention. He had spent 3 years since then deciding whether she was right. He was beginning to think she was. He had seen Sable Quill on the lobby security feed at 10:02. He had not needed a text from June Fenwick, though it arrived at 10:05. He had not needed a phone call from Aldous Fenn, though that one came at 10:07. He had already stood up from his desk at 10:03 because what he saw on that monitor was a woman sitting in a lobby chair with a wire transfer confirmation open on her laptop and a stillness about her that he recognized immediately as the stillness of someone who has absolutely nothing to prove and has known it for a long time. He took the elevator down. He came through the lobby doors at 10:09, and he read the room in under 5 seconds the way he read every room, which is to say completely, and without narrating what he saw to himself, just absorbing the information and understanding what it meant. He saw June Fenwick standing beside the reception desk with the particular quality of stillness she maintained in serious situations. He saw Sable Quill in the leather chair, laptop closed now, waiting with the patience of someone who has worked outdoors all her life and understands that some things take the time they take. He saw Portia Dane at her desk pretending to type. He saw Ob Birch at the water dispenser with his cart and understood without being told that Ob Birch had seen and heard everything and was waiting to be useful. He walked directly to Sable Quill. He did not stop at the desk. He did not acknowledge Portia. He crossed the marble floor of his own firm's lobby, and he stopped in front of the woman in the dusty boots, and he said, "Ms. Quill, I am Beckett Stroud, and I am very glad you are here. I am sorry for the delay." Sable looked up at him. She was not particularly tall. She had a faint mark of red Wyoming clay on the left toe of her boot from the waterline she had fixed at 4 that morning. Her jacket still carried the faint, cold, clean smell of high-altitude outdoor air, the kind of air that does not exist anywhere in Manhattan, and that made the marble lobby feel, for just a moment, like a slightly more honest place than it usually was. She stood. She put out her hand. He shook it. Her grip told him everything that Phineas Cord had not needed to explain. She said, "No problem at all. I was reviewing the escrow confirmation." He nodded. He turned toward the desk, and he looked at Portia Dane for exactly 2 seconds. It was not a long look. It did not need to be. The sentence it communicated required no words and very little time. Then he said to Sable, "We have coffee upstairs and the boardroom is ready. Phineas sends his regards. He mentioned that you would likely be the most prepared person in this building today." Sable said, "He is being generous." Beckett said, "I reviewed the questions you submitted with your preliminary site survey 3 days ago. He is not being generous." They walked to the elevator together. The lobby watched them go. The investor in the navy suit stared at the floor tiles. The junior agents looked at each other. June Fenwick, standing near the reception desk, allowed herself the smallest, most private expression of satisfaction she had permitted herself in a very long time. And Birch, at the water dispenser, finished what he was doing, wiped his hands on his work cloth, and sent a text message to June Fenwick's number that read, "I have audio, whatever you need." 3 seconds later she replied, with a single word, "Come." The meeting on the 22nd floor lasted 90 minutes. What happened in that boardroom was not dramatic. It was precise, which in the world of commercial real estate is considerably more impressive than dramatic. Sable had reviewed the West 28th Street building's complete financial profile before she arrived in New York. Current tenancy, lease expiration schedules, net operating income over the previous 4 years, deferred maintenance line items, comparable sales within the immediate corridor. She had a 3-page summary in the Manila folder. She had 3 questions. They were not preliminary questions. They were the questions of someone who had already done the work and was now in the process of confirming specific variables before making a final decision. Beckett answered them honestly, including the one about the HVAC system, which needed full replacement within the next 30 months, and which the listing documents had noted in an appendix paragraph written in the smallest font the firm's standard template permitted. He told her the number and the timeline without being asked to expand on it. She wrote something in the margin of her summary page, she said. "I will account for it in the offer structure." He said, "I want to be straightforward with you. This firm has carried this listing for 11 months. The reason it has not closed is that every qualified buyer who walked through was either dependent on financing that delayed the process or hesitant about the deferred maintenance costs. You are neither of those things. You are the transaction this building has been waiting for, and I want to make sure this firm deserves it." Sable looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "My grandfather used to say that the best deals are the ones where both parties walk away thinking they won. I want this building. I want to be fair about it. Let's figure out what that looks like." Beckett said, "We will." Downstairs, while the meeting was happening, June Fenwick walked into Aldous Fenn's office at 10:45 and closed the door behind her. She had been the office manager at Meridian Realty Partners for 19 years. She had worked for 3 managing partners and through 2 recessions and 1 office relocation, and she had a comprehensive and unflattering memory of everything that had ever occurred at the reception desk in all that time. She placed Birch's phone on Aldous Fenn's desk and played the recording without preamble. It lasted 47 seconds. In those 47 seconds, it contained Portia Dane's voice, the phrase "service entrance," and the quality of silence that 12 people in a marble lobby produce when they have just witnessed something they know is wrong, but do not have the standing to correct. Aldous listened to all of it. He sat back in his chair. He said, "What is the value of the Quill transaction?" June said, "The West 28th Street property lists at $18.4 million. Firm commission at 3% is $552,000. It has been sitting on our books for 11 months. Aldous Fenn was a man who had spent 20 years making decisions quickly and living with the consequences. He picked up his phone and called the head of human resources and spoke for 90 seconds. Then he stood up from his desk and walked downstairs himself. Because some things should not be communicated by email or through intermediaries. Aldous Fenn came through the office door at 11:47. He was a quiet man by nature, the kind of managing partner who communicated authority through economy of movement rather than volume. The open-plan floor had 14 people at their desks. Every one of them looked up when he entered, because Aldous Fenn did not come to this floor in the middle of a workday. He came to his office. He attended scheduled meetings. He did not walk through the open floor. The fact that he was here now, and walking with the particular directness of someone who knows exactly where they are going and exactly what they are about to do, created a silence on that floor that began before he reached the reception desk and grew as he approached it. He stopped at Portia Dane's desk. He did not raise his voice. He said her name once. Portia. She looked up. He said, "Please clear your things by end of day." He did not explain. He did not elaborate. He did not wait for a response. He turned and walked back to the elevator, and the doors closed behind him, and the floor sat in the silence he had left behind, and no one said a single word. Portia Dane did not speak for 5 seconds. She looked around the office, and what she saw on the faces of the people looking back at her was something worse than hostility. It was recognition. The junior agents who had watched her turn 3 different people toward the service entrance in the past year. The accounting assistant whose lunch she had taken from the communal refrigerator and then denied. The paralegal she had told on his first week that he had parked in the wrong garage, which was not true, because she simply wanted him to know that she could make small things difficult if she chose to. The woman from the property research team who had heard her make a joke, in a voice designed to be overheard, about an applicant's accent during a phone screening 6 months ago. They were all looking at her now, and none of them said anything, and that silence was the loudest verdict she had ever heard. Ob Birch came back around the corner with his cart at 11:49, moving slowly, not looking up, refilling the water dispenser he had already refilled 2 hours ago. His presence was the most eloquent thing in the room. Portia gathered her things in 23 minutes. She did not cry at the desk. She went to the women's restroom on the floor below, and she stayed there for 7 minutes. And then she came back and finished collecting her items into the tote bag she used for exactly that Kotlik's kind of leaving, which was a thought she did not let herself complete. She walked past the reception desk for the last time, and she pushed through the glass door to the elevator bank, and she went down to the street, and she stood on 7th Avenue in the October light with her tote and her precise nails and her blazer, and the absolute certainty that she had done this to herself, not today, but in the accumulation of every small choice she had made at that desk for 3 years, each one individually small enough to rationalize, and collectively large enough to constitute a career. What Portia Dane did not know yet, because the story was still moving faster than she could track, was that Tatum O'Dell filed his piece not the next morning but that same afternoon at 4:45, because it was that kind of story, the kind that does not wait. The New York Post ran it online at 6:15 under the headline, "Boots on the Ground, the $18 million deal." A midtown receptionist almost showed the door. It described the lobby with the precision of a man who had been sitting in it with a recorder running at the right moment. It named Meridian Realty Partners. It described the escrow confirmation on the laptop screen. It described Beckett Stroud walking across the marble floor, directly to the woman in dusty work boots, without stopping at the desk. It described, in one sentence, that Tatum O'Dell was quietly proud of: the particular silence of 12 people who had just watched someone decide their own professional fate in public. Sable Quill was quoted once, because Tatum had caught her briefly in the lobby after the meeting as she was leaving and had introduced himself and asked whether she would take a question. She had paused. He had said, "What went through your mind when you were told to wait in the side chairs?" She had considered this for a moment. Then she said, "I thought about my grandfather. He built an 8,000-acre ranch, starting with a loan and a handshake. He never once needed someone to know who he was before he did what he came to do." She put her tote over her shoulder. She pushed through the glass door. She was on 7th Avenue for approximately 12 seconds before she pulled out her phone and called Ridley Theus to tell him the closing was moving forward. Behind her, through the glass, Tatum O'Dell typed the last line of his piece. The story was shared 9,000 times before midnight. There is a thing that happens to people who build their sense of authority on the right to decide who deserves to be in a room. It works for a while. It works precisely because the people they dismiss often do not fight back, and the absence of resistance can be mistaken for the absence of consequence. But consequences do not require a fight. They accumulate quietly, the way debt accumulates. And they present themselves at the moment of their own choosing, which is never the moment the person expects. Portia Dane spent the evening sending emails she should not have sent. One to Beckett Stroud, explaining that she had simply been following standard protocol and asking if there was any possibility of a conversation. He did not respond. One to the general firm address, asking to speak with someone in human resources about the terms of her departure. The response came the following morning from the HR director and was brief and professional and contained nothing she could use. 2 days later, she saw the Post article. She read it on her phone in the apartment she shared with a roommate in Murray Hill, sitting on the edge of her bed in the morning. And she read it twice, because the first time she was reading for her own name, and the second time she was reading to understand that it did not matter whether her name appeared or not, because the story described the situation with enough specificity that anyone who had been in that lobby, or who worked in that building, or who knew anyone who did, would understand exactly who was being described. The story was shared 42,000 times by the following Friday. It was picked up by 3 real estate industry newsletters and 1 national business publication that ran a brief item under the headline, "The Cost of Judging a Client by Her Boots." The industry is a smaller world than it appears from the outside, and certain kinds of information move through it quickly. Portia Dane submitted 3 job applications to competing real estate firms in the following 2 weeks. She received no responses. She expanded her search. The search took longer than she had expected. Meanwhile, in a building on West 28th Street in Chelsea that she would never set foot in, the closing was being prepared. And in an office on the 22nd floor of a midtown tower she no longer had access to, a managing partner named Aldous Fenn had framed a copy of the Post headline and hung it in his office, not as a celebration of what had happened, but as a reminder of what an 11-month listing had nearly cost the firm, and why the people a firm trusts with its first impression are never a secondary consideration. And Birch, who had received a phone call the week after from a property management company he had never contacted, offering him a building manager position at a salary 40% above what he was currently earning, answered the call and accepted the position, and never learned who had made the referral. He had suspicions. He kept them to himself. Some people give quietly. The good ones do not require the credit. The closing happened on a Thursday. The offices of Ridley Theus were on the 14th floor of a building on Lexington Avenue, with a view of the Con Edison plant and a framed photograph on the wall behind the desk of Howard Quill, shaking hands with a younger version of Phineas Cord in front of a Denver warehouse, 1987. Ridley had kept that photograph for 36 years. Sable had not known it existed until she walked in that morning. She stood in front of it for a long time before the documents were ready. She was wearing clean jeans, a white button-down, and the same Ariat boots, cleaned but still recognizably the boots of a woman who does not change her footwear for a closing. On her left wrist, her grandfather's Citizen EcoDrive, scratched dial, titanium case, the second hand still moving with the quiet precision of something built to last. Beckett Stroud sat across from her at the table. He had reviewed these documents 4 times. He had been reviewing them at 6 that morning at his apartment in the West Village, with Prue's most recent hair tie still on the kitchen counter, where she had left it the previous Sunday, pink, looped twice around nothing in particular, right where he could see it from the stove while the coffee brewed. He had thought, for reasons he could not fully account for, about what it would mean to stop measuring the distance between himself and the things that actually mattered to him. Ridley placed the final document in front of Sable. She signed it with a plain black ballpoint pen, the kind that costs $1 and does not aspire to be noticed. Beckett noticed. He did not say anything. When the last signature was complete, Ridley closed the folder and said, "Congratulations, Miss Quill. You own the building." Sable pressed her palm flat against the surface of the closed folder for one moment. The way you touch something you have worked toward and want to be certain is real. Then she looked up and she said, "My grandfather never owned anything in Manhattan. He would have liked knowing his name is on something here." Beckett said, "He would have liked knowing you closed it the way you did." She tilted her head slightly. She said, "How is that?" he said, without making anyone feel small in the process, including the person who tried to make you feel that way first. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He used to say that contempt is a waste of energy. You cannot afford it if you are building something." They sat with that. Outside the window, Midtown continued its business, entirely uninterested in what had just become permanent between these walls. Ridley Theus quietly removed his reading glasses and found something to look at on his desk. After the signing, Beckett asked whether she had time before her flight. She said she had 2 hours. He said he knew a coffee place in Chelsea that was very good and had nothing to recommend it aesthetically, which was the highest praise he could offer anything. She said that was exactly what she wanted. They walked. It was October in Manhattan, cold and bright and specific in the way that city only occasionally allows itself to be, and they talked for nearly 2 hours. He told her about Prue, about the hair ties on every surface, about the Sunday evenings after she went home when the apartment went quiet in a way that was technically same quiet as before she arrived, but felt entirely different. Sable told him about the ranch at sunrise, the particular hour when the light comes over the eastern ridge and turns everything gold for about 12 minutes before it becomes ordinary again, and how the cattle move in that light like a single, slow thought, and how nothing that seemed urgent the day before survives contact with that 12 minutes of sky. He said he would very much like to see that someday. She looked at him with the directness that was simply, he was beginning to understand the way she looked at everything. She said, "Then come." He flew to Laramie 8 weeks later. Prue came with him. She fed a calf named Douglas on a Saturday morning and declared it, in the absolute terms available only to 9-year-olds, the single best day of her life. That evening she left a pink hair tie on Sable's kitchen counter. Sable found it before she went to bed. She left it there. She looked at it for a moment, standing in the kitchen in the dark, and she did not move it, and she thought just a little about what it might mean, and then she went to bed. On the drive back to the airport on Sunday, Beckett looked out the window at the land, flat and endless, and lit from every angle at once, the way land is when there is nothing between it and the sky, and he said, almost to himself, "I have been looking at the wrong things." Sable, who was driving and who missed very little, said nothing. She just smiled and kept driving. Epictetus wrote that no person is free who is not master of themselves. He wrote it for himself, in a time when he owned nothing, and was owned by someone else. And he wrote it not as consolation but as instruction, because Epictetus understood something that most people spend their lives avoiding. The only territory that cannot be taken from you is the territory you have honestly earned inside yourself. Sable Quill walked into a marble lobby in Midtown Manhattan, wearing dust from a waterline she had fixed at 4 in the morning, and she was not diminished by what happened at that desk, because the diminishment requires your participation, and she simply declined to participate. She did not need the room to know who she was. She already knew. That is not luck. It is not family money. It is the specific product of years of getting up before sunrise and paying people what they were owed and fixing things that were broken, and not taking a salary for 14 months because the people who depended on her needed their checks first. That is what was in those boots. Not wealth, not revenge, just a record. And a record, unlike an impression, cannot be revised. 3 things this story leaves behind for anyone who needs them. The first, a person who is genuinely certain of their worth does not need to announce it. They do not need the right shoes or the right coat or the right lobby. They need the right folder and the patience to wait for the room to catch up. The second, every act of contempt is a confession. When Portia Dane looked at Sable Quill and assigned her a category, she revealed nothing about Sable Quill. She revealed the system she lived by, and systems built on contempt for how people look and where they come from are systems that eventually consume the person who built them. The third, the love that lasts is the love that stays when things get hard. Beckett Stroud did not cross that lobby floor because he knew who she was. He crossed it because of what he saw, which was a woman sitting with complete calm in the middle of someone else's small cruelty. And that kind of stillness is rarer than money and more attractive than power. And it is the only quality that actually predicts what a person will be, like when the story stops being easy. Prue's hair tie is still on Sable's kitchen counter. The building on West 28th Street is now Quill Commercial, LLC. In its first year of Sable's ownership, the net operating income exceeded projections by 11%. Howard Quill's name is on a building in Manhattan. He would have liked that. He would have liked it quietly, without making a fuss about it, the way he liked most things. And somewhere in Scottsdale, Arizona, on a Thursday morning, Phineas Cord picked up his phone and saw a photograph that Sol had sent him. It was the closing document, the signature at the bottom. The Meridian Realty Partners letterhead. He looked at it for a long time. Then he set the phone down and went out to his garden and did not tell anyone why he was smiling, because some things do not require explanation. Life does not always reward good people immediately, but good people do not lose. They are simply being protected by time from the things that were never worth their energy. The sincere ones do not need to prove very much. The false ones always, eventually, prove themselves, and real love is the person who is still there when the story gets difficult. That is all. That is everything.